Good evening. Welcome back to Poe Discussions with Carmen and Jeanie. I am Carmen Bolden.
And I'm Jeanie Smith, and we
We
are
are the
the Potastic
Potastic
2.
2.
Um,
Yay!
we're getting closer.
Yes, we got it. Well, welcome back, and we have a very special guest, and his name is A. Rubin, and we want our Ari to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Oh, hey, thanks for having me. My name is A. Rubin. I am a writer, an author, a poet. I write everything from formal poetry that tends towards the Gothic to comic books and almost everything in between. Um, so I've done short stories. I'm about to query a novel um, right after my crowdfunding campaign for a picture book is over. So I have, you know, a lot of different things going on. Um,
Yeah.
but a lot of what I've done recently has been Gothic and Poe
Okay.
inspired.
Okay. Awesome.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, that we love that.
Yeah.
We are the
Um,
Gothic peoples. The
yes,
peoples? I think it was supposed to be peoples. I don't know what came out, but all right.
that's okay. Well, how did you like start in your like career as a writer and a poet? And just like, have you been doing this a long time, or was it something that came later in life?
I have been doing it a long time. So I became a writer, and you're gonna be hearing a lot about the Scholastic Book Club and the Scholastic Book Fair thing. I decided I wanted to be a writer when I was in seventh grade, and I ordered The Hobbit from the Scholastic Book Club,
Mm-hmm.
and I read The Hobbit, and I read The Lord of the Rings, and I said, you know what? Maybe these games I'm playing with my castle Legos might make good stories. And it just sort of hung out in the back of my mind for, you
Okay.
know, a while. And then, as I got older, um, I kind of like there. It wasn't something that I was doing a lot of in high school or anything like that. I would I would get bored in English class and write short stories instead of they would give us these quotes. I don't know if you remember that back then there was something called the writing achievement. They had the
I
achievement
think
tests in
so.
addition to the SATs, and you
Yes.
had to write these
Yeah.
things. And, you know, I knew I was going to do well on the writing part, so they would give us these quotes and we'd have to respond to them. And I'd write little science fiction stories based on whatever silly quote they gave us for the 20-minute writing. And then
Uh-huh.
about halfway through college, I had started out as a political science major and I hated it.
Okay.
'Cause, I got tired of being in 300-person lecture halls and having papers graded by TAs and not the professor and whatever. And I was like, I kind of remembered the writing thing. And I took a creative writing class, and I became a double major in writing and literature. And
Okay.
I had my first short story published about a year after I graduated, and been
That's
kind of doing
awesome.
that. The poetry thing came later. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that was basically two things that led me into poetry. One was before the whole social media blow up thing where there were like 500 different platforms. There was a really strong
Hmm.
writing community on Twitter, and
Okay.
they used to post these prompts. And there were these things, the hashtag prompts, where they would give you a word and you had to write a tweet that responded to the prompt. And for some reason, I started writing these little rhyming poetry things with them. Um,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it just sort of fit. And then I was also a high school English teacher at the time, and I was teaching AP literature and working
Yeah.
with a lot of the poetry and the poetic devices and a lot of the technical aspects of poetry. And I kind of, I wrote a couple of poems, I sent them off, some of them got published, and sort of led down that road. Last year I had way more poems than fiction that were
Okay.
published. Partly because I was writing the novel, so I wasn't writing as many short stories, partly because when I was on the child care leave and taking care of my children,
Hmm.
it's all flash fiction and poetry. You don't have as much time to sit down, although the
Yeah.
poems do take longer than you would think when you're writing metered. But I started writing more poetry, and it's become a really big part of what I write.
That is amazing, and your poetry is beautiful. You do
Thank you.
such a
Mhm.
good job. And he won our first annual Poet Like Poe contest, poetry
Poetry
contest.
contest, yes.
Yes.
And I've gotten great feedback on the name. People love it.
Oh, great,
I
great.
just had a reading at a local library a couple of weeks ago, and it
Okay,
was put on by this guy James Wagner, who runs one of our local poetry presses here on Long Island. Like, all he publishes in poetry. He has a
okay.
poetry themed bookstore, and he's
Oh,
reading
neat. Oh,
he's
neat.
reading my he asked me to feature at this thing, and
Hmm.
he's reading my bio there. He's like, "Oh, poet like poet." He's like, "Oh, I love that." And he
Oh,
stopped
that's
in the
awesome.
middle.
That makes
So
us feel great.
yeah, you
Well,
know,
and when we came up with that, Jeannie and I kind of were like, what should we do? And it's like, we want people to write in the style of Poe, or, of
right.
something that he would write. And that just stuck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know,
Whether it be using the type of wording or the meter or
Yeah.
just the theme,
Yeah.
we just wanted it to be as close to Poe. So we're like poet like Poe.
poet. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
a great. I'm a big fan of puns. I know it's a
Yeah.
gothic. We should have. I know I shouldn't admit this on a gothic podcast, but I love Douglas Adams and Terry Pratchett and
Oh, yeah.
Monty Python and all of these.
We do too.
The thing is all. It's all built on puns.
Oh, absolutely.
I wanted to
Absolutely.
make a shirt that said "Days since making a poetry pun, zero," and
There you go.
Oh,
uh,
that's awesome.
And
Well,
it's
Ian,
really cool, especially if you being a teacher, that we're all three. Carmen's current teacher, you were a
mhm,
former teacher, and I'm a retired former teacher.
yeah,
So, and it was just so much fun, especially when you can have your students recognize puns and be able
mhm,
to use them correctly is a miracle half the time. Like irony, half of them have no idea what irony truly is, and we're like, no, that's not irony. No, Alanis Morissette, that's not irony. Okay. But it is good that the poetry is taken off, and I think it's hitting more now with trending, because I
mhm,
noticed that things change sometimes. Like short stories will trend at a certain time,
yeah,
especially with certain genres, especially in young adult literature, or
yeah,
early childhood, those kinds of things. So, and there's more social media platforms now that will publish, or you can do publishing on your own. Whereas back in the day, and yes, it's sad that I can get to use those words now that have reached that mark in life. That, oh yeah, back in my day, but when one of the most popular poetry magazines was Mobius, and that was kind of one of the major ones that you would want to submit your poems to and get in. And this was like back in the this was early 2000s, so it wasn't even that far
right.
back.
yeah, Jeannie,
Uh,
that's not that far back in the day. I guess
Yeah.
we are
well,
old,
you
so
wouldn't think so, but
yeah,
we're 24 years into the new century, and it's like,
yeah, that's true.
what? You know, because if you think about it, 100 years ago, about this time, we were, world was gearing up for not only World War I, but they just finished a pandemic, and the stock market crash was coming. So,
Very true. Very true.
hopefully, well, knock on wood, we don't have to worry about that coming.
Yes. Well,
So,
and I was going to say, and kind of going back to the Poet Like Poe poetry contest, Ari's
mhm.
going to be one of our judges this year, and we're so excited that you're going to be doing that for us.
No,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll be a lot of fun. Well, one of the questions we always ask everybody that we interview, what is your favorite Poe story? And I'm sure you've got a favorite story and poem. Some people have just one in general. I think I know what you're going to say for poem, but yeah, just go ahead.
We talked about the poem before.
Yes.
My favorite poem is The Bells.
Yeah.
I love The Bells. I know it's a
Yeah.
later poem. I know it's a, but I really, it's a poem that I taught as one of the
Yeah.
poems that was in our AP Lit textbook that I used to teach to my
Yeah.
kids every year. And the way that, I mean, just the technique throughout it and the way that it shifts. It also shows, I know, something that I know Carmen talks about is the breadth of what Poe writes about. And,
Mhm.
even within that poem, just the shifts in tone from the beginning of the poem,
Oh, yeah.
um, through the end of the poem where it becomes what most people think of when they think about Poe, and the way that the vowels
Yeah.
sounds, the internal vowel sounds match the different kinds of bells in each of the four sections. Really,
Absolutely.
really, really nice. In terms
Okay, I gotta
of,
say it. I'm sorry, I've gotta say it. It resonates through.
yeah, tintinnabulation, is
Yeah.
that what that's
I'm
where we're
sorry.
going? Yeah,
I love that
Sorry.
word.
it's a
Yeah,
great word. Yeah,
tintilation, yes.
Oh,
tintinnabulation of the bells. Yeah,
yeah.
and there's a great I mean, I used to have the kids listen to the Basil Rathbone reading of that poem, and he's
Yes.
just
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a
incredible.
great voice.
And the
Yes.
way, a lot of times, like there's a Vincent Price and there's a bunch of others, but a lot of them try to make the whole thing Gothic. Like they'll read it and like,
Yeah.
they'll make all the, and
Yeah.
it's not. And what I love about the way
Mhm.
Basil Rathbone does it is that you really get those tone shifts in each part of the poem.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
in terms of my favorite post story, it's interesting because the novel that I just finished writing that I'm going to start querying is a Sherlock Holmes uh, world novel. It takes
Oh,
place in the
nice.
world of Sherlock Holmes, and I actually have a bet going on between Sherlock Holmes and Dupin that sort of runs
Oh.
throughout the thing. And I would say that if you ask me this minute, and it might change next week, but coming off of the research I was doing for that, is my
Mhm.
favorite um, post story would probably be the Purloined Letter right now. Um,
Okay.
and just because, first of all, the model of it is very much like you could see the influence to Conan Doyle, even more
Yeah.
than the Rue Morgue, or, because the Rue Morgue has that weird um kind of frame story where you have this, it comes in. But the Purloined Letter is very much the archetype that became the detective story
Yeah.
later on. And I also love that in the I guess, I mean, it wouldn't have been called that, but in what we would call in an Agatha Christie novel, like the parlor scene, with
Yes.
Sherlock
Oh,
Holmes,
yes.
in the parlor scene when he's explaining to the constable how he solved it and how,
Hmm.
why the guy didn't. And I'm not going to give it away in case anyone
Right.
did see. I imagine that most people listening to a podcast you know, would be
Knowledgeable of
familiar,
that, yeah.
but
Right.
you never know.
That's
But
true.
one of the things he says is that he was looking at it too rationally and he wasn't looking at it like a poet, that there was a touch of the
Yeah.
poetry to the investigation. And when he started thinking about it more in terms of like a poet than like rational, um, just by deduction, that's when he figured out how to solve the case. And there's
Yeah.
something about that I love as a writer and a poet, and
Hmm.
also because on a meta level, with Poe being the author of it, and him writing both, inventing the detective novel and also inventing the Gothic genre, basically,
Yeah.
that he would have that idea come into that story there. I really like that part of it
Yeah.
at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a fantastic story. And I think just from talking to a lot of people, I think Jeannie and kind of chime in on this too. I I find that most people know Murders of the Rue Morgue just because it was the
Right,
first
the
one.
first
It's
one.
been more film versions, allusions in different TV shows and also in movies. And Marie Roget gets a little bit of press, but the Purloined Letter is just that gold nugget, that unicorn that most people, I think, if they read that, if they would read all three, they probably would find how fantastic it is. But I don't know. I think diehard Poe fans know it, but I think some of the people that are coming into
Yeah,
Poe don't know it as much. But I agree with you. I don't like to give
yeah,
spoilers either.
yeah,
Jeannie, what do you think?
Well, the thing that really, when you really dive into the stories, well, one of the things is he's posting these in the magazine, so it's not like he's
Right.
like publishing
right,
it in his individual. like a little individual booklet, like the dime store novels and those kinds of things back in those days. However, and this could be also part of the thing that he got hammered by the serial
Yeah.
of the stories, because we all know, especially when you think about movies, especially that one's usually the best. Two, you kind of keep an interest, but by three,
Mhm.
you're like, I don't know if I want to watch it anymore. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, I think that might have been part of the readership that may have been going on, that they got interested in the first one and then he posted the second one and it was more of a true crime. So it didn't have the fantastical from the first one as much. It was more towards, oh, this is actually happening in real life in places. So,
Mhm.
what does he know? Drawing you in. And then I guess by the third one, most people may have lost interest. It just didn't, I mean, true Poe fans probably still was
Yeah.
reading it, but it wasn't getting the readership because it had turned into more of a series type rather than something new, even though
Yeah.
it was new. But also, and one of the things that most people may not get, like, you were saying, Ari, is he started looking at behaviors, when
Yeah.
he was not just looking at the forensics and talking about the science and everything. We did an episode about phrenology, talking about, just the bumps on the head was dispositions for certain people, which we know that was now a pseudoscience because it's just woo. That just means how many times you fell and hit your head. Okay, I'm just saying. And yes, traumatic brain injury can change the personality of someone, so that could have, a play into it. But he, along with being the detective father, behavioral science. I mean, you got to think
Mhm.
he kind of threw that in there too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, why would someone do this? Why, what was the motive behind it without using those exact wording that you would find in most criminology
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Poe, being Poe, he was both a critic, he was a poet, he was a short story, he had all this other kind of things. He was like a Renaissance man, true to the point, but he was,
Mhm.
and I hate to say this, if you think about it, he could be somewhat of a snob,
Yeah. Well, and I
you
think
know.
kind of like, Ari, you talked about this the other day when we were on our being all guests
Yep.
together, the
Yeah.
other day. The technical aspect of Poe's knowledge and writing, and I think it transcends into poetry, short stories, criticisms. He was a true technical writer, and that's one thing I love about him because, like, one of the things I love to do is teach writing. Most of my English classes were more geared toward all the different writing styles, and I guess I'm more of a technical writer as well, not like Poe, but, and, like, when I teach
Right.
it, I'm very technical with it because I want the kids to have what they need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people, like, he has this image, right? You have the irrational and the
Yeah.
thing, right? But he's got a lot of stuff going on in the background
Yes.
that
Yes.
he's using to create that, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and the thing is, I think maybe also, but yeah, the murder in the rue morgue, you got the monkey, right? So when they're gonna use one for the when you're gonna use one for the Netflix series, right? When you have to pick whatever
Yeah.
8 things, that's the
Yeah.
one you're gonna use because
Yeah.
it's easy to do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You're
Yeah.
gonna do the Telltale Heart because it's the Telltale, because everybody knows, like, which
Mhm.
stories you're gonna use, but
Yeah.
it's a more subtle story. But it's like, I remember, like, I reread all that stuff because I read thousands of pages of research when I was doing this, because
I can
the
imagine.
in the novel there's a number of literary characters who show up.
Hmm.
In fact, it forms the mystery of the thing.
Yeah.
And I reread every book I referenced. So I'd read 900 pages of George Eliot just for like a paragraph, or a
Wow.
story,
Wow.
like, just to make sure
Yeah.
I got it right. So
Yeah.
I was revisiting because there were a number of scenes involving that bet that I had.
Yeah.
And what struck me, though, was, having reread all of the Sherlock Holmes as well, is that's the story that seems to be the model. Like, even though it's not the most
Okay.
Mhm.
famous one, that's the one that reads most like what became like the typical Sherlock Holmes story,
Okay.
just in
Oh, that's
terms of
cool.
form, just in terms of the way it's narrated, just all of those things. Um, at least in my opinion, like that
Yeah.
was the one that I feel like, and Conan Doyle references a number of times, references different, Dupin a number of times,
Hmm.
and in the stories, but I feel like that's the one that he kind of got the structure from.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Well, kind of with what you're saying about like having you reread many
Yeah.
things that you had
Yeah.
already read, and just like, do you want to talk about your writing process or your research process of when you are working on things?
So I have a very different writing process than a lot of other people do, and I talk about this and I write like it about because I feel like before I say anything about it is that there are many ways to write, and
Yeah.
there are many
Mhm.
ways to write successfully. And if
Hmm.
anybody ever tells you this is the way you have to do it or this is the right way to do it,
Hmm.
that person is wrong, right? I used to tell my student, I always said, "Oh, English has no wrong answers." I was like, "Well, that's not true. There
Yeah.
are wrong answers, but
Yeah.
the thing is, there is more than one right answer, and there's
Yes.
more than
Yeah.
one path."
Yes.
So this is what I do. It may be different, and there are reasons why I do this, and the reason why it works for me. I am a complete pantser as a writer. I am a discovery writer. I do not outline. I write and see where it goes. In order to
Okay.
write, I need the narrative voice in my head, whatever
Okay.
it is, right? If I'm writing, let's say we're writing fiction, I need the narrative, whatever, first person, third person, second person sometimes.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter. As soon as I hear that voice in my head,
Hmm.
it's like that character or that narrator is telling the story, and I just
Okay.
listen and write. And that's how I do it, and that's how I go. And it's slow sometimes, and it's
Hmm.
thing. And when I write poetry, it's the same thing. I need the opening lines. I'll often get the opening line first. I'll
Okay.
get them. I'll get the little opening lines first.
Yeah.
I'll get maybe a stanza, and then I can expand to the rest. And then
Okay.
since I'm writing metered poetry, when I'm writing fiction, I write it on my laptop and I'm just, I'm typing. It's
Hmm.
actually the most famous pantser writer as a pantser was Jack Kerouac. And he famously wrote on
Hmm.
a scroll so he wouldn't have to change the pages even to take a break from his stream of
Yeah.
consciousness,
Right.
right? Um, well, we all write on scrolls now, right? If we're writing on a
Mhm.
computer or a word processor, right? It's an
Absolutely.
infinite scroll. Like,
Hmm.
um, but when I write poetry, I actually write it out longhand because
Okay.
I actually usually get the end rhymes first, and
Hmm.
then I get the syllable count, and then I fix the meter. So I'm constantly going back and crossing things out and reworking
Okay.
things to get into the thing.
Mhm.
But still, even so, I need that I need that first little four-line stanza, that first couplet even, that
Yeah.
first image that I get down there, and then I can get to the rest of the poem. And you know, I write a lot of closed form. I write a lot of sonnets and villanelles and things of that nature. And obviously
Hmm.
that requires some shaping, to do
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
But I don't map out the rhyme scheme in advance the same way. I just sort of do it naturally. Um,
Okay.
and I think that part of the reason is that the outlines are all in my head. You
Yeah.
know, I
Mhm.
was, I was a lifelong reader. I was a literature major, as an English teacher for a long time, teaching in
Hmm.
some of the best schools in New York with the
Hmm.
highest achieving students, and I know what's supposed to happen in the story.
Yeah.
Like if you're writing a
Mhm.
tragedy or you're writing, whatever it is, you're writing a detective story or,
Yeah.
fantasy story, right? I know the beat. I don't have to write out the beats because I know them. I've already learned them. And it's like
Yes.
sort of
Yes.
when I do it, if I were to try to map it out in advance, then what happens is it feels flat to me. It doesn't
Okay.
it doesn't feel like it's alive when I write it. It feels like there's something missing and I'm not fully immersed
Yeah.
in the process of in the process of writing. And, you know, I know that that's not for everybody, but that's how I work. Like I
Hmm.
remember even for I started writing something for a class. I took a class over the pandemic online with Ray Bradbury's biographer. It was a
Okay.
creative writing
Oh,
class.
neat.
It was a
Okay.
creative writing class that I wouldn't have been able to take if it wasn't a pandemic because he teaches in Chicago. So,
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
needed
Okay.
at that point, I was still wasn't sure if I was going back to teaching after, after the pandemic, whatever. And I needed the professional development credits. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, this is Ray Bradbury and creative writing is like from a university in Chicago. And okay, and it counts, but it's also something I want to do. So
Yeah.
I was able to do it.
It's like,
And I
sign me up.
remember,
There we go.
I
Yes.
asked him, I was writing a longer story and um I was over the word count for the final project and I asked him about it. I'm like, can I submit it? He's like, well, just write to the word count and then give me what happens, what happens in the end. So I did. And after I wrote it, I got up to, he only was wanting to read 10,000 words or whatever. And I wrote the rest of it
Hmm.
just in bullet points of what was going to happen. It took me a full year to get back to writing that story because in my mind it was finished. Once
Yep.
I once I
Yes.
had worked out the ending for the purpose of sending it to him because I needed to for the class because he's not going to read 50,000 words. He's
Right.
got,
Right.
Yeah.
he has a limit of what the assignment is. You know, once I had that, even the briefest little bullet point outline, I couldn't write the rest of it. And
Okay.
I couldn't write the rest of it for a long time, and I ended up erasing it and just when I
Yep.
got back in and not even following it, even though I had done that process. And I needed enough time so that I didn't remember all the little beats that I put in there,
Yeah.
just so I was able to get back into my process and do it. So,
Okay.
that's me. That's how I am. Um, and you know, I know that it's not what most people, but I was the kid who did the outline after the essay when the
Hmm.
teacher required it. I was, you know,
Yeah.
it's that's how I am. And there actually are a lot of successful writers who write like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think I'm really glad you said, you kind of have to figure out what works for
Yeah.
you,
Hmm.
keeping some of those, the rules present, but the process doesn't have to be confined and
Right.
caged to where you feel like you can't go out of the box and
Right.
do something how you want to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, even on the smallest, like, don't have to get sidetracked on writing rules, but
Yeah.
there's this whole cottage industry in writing rules where
Yeah.
people will post certain things, and it's like, okay, fine. Ernest Hemingway and Stephen King say not to use modifiers and no adverbs, no whatever. But it's like, then you're reading Salman Rushdie, who's
Uh-huh.
by any measure one of the most successful writers, literary and
Yes.
commercial, and there's adverbs on every single dialogue tag in some of the
Hmm.
Yep.
chapters. And it's like, really? Okay, so I'm not supposed to do what's it's like it didn't hurt Salman Rushdie when he did it. It's
Right.
like not to say that Stephen King or Hemingway or whoever should do it because they're also successful. But I'm just you know, there are
Yeah.
ways to do it. I mean,
Well,
I used to read a lot of craft books and especially try to get, teaching techniques and
hmm
everything.
Hmm.
And I forget what it's called, but Matthew Salacis's book that was criticizing the craft model,
Okay.
the
Okay.
Western craft model, that it wasn't, you know, basically it was discriminatory against non-Western students for cultural reasons that, but his writing exercises were spectacular. But one of the things in that book that really stood out to me was he was talking about the 3x structure. And
hmm
everyone's
Okay.
like, oh, you need the 3x structure. I was like, no, you don't. Half of the plays that we teach, right? We've all been English teachers, right?
hmm
Half the plays we
Yes.
teach are 2x, right?
Yes. That is
And
very true.
Yep.
you know what? What do all writers struggle with? It's the middle, right?
Yes,
Yep.
it
Everyone's like, I
is.
could do beginnings, I could do ends. Middle, that's right.
Yeah.
Why not, and
Yeah.
2x structure, you can make your entire story parallel incidents around. Like if
Yes.
you think of the hero journey and the descent into the pit and the rise back up, right?
Yeah.
People try to divide it into a third thing, which isn't like, Homer wasn't writing a 3x, right? Like You know, that's
Right.
Aristotle, much later on, you know, going on talking about plays, not even about epics, but people have a
Mhm.
limited, they try to fit everything into 3 act structure. It's like,
Mhm.
well, if you look at it to the underworld and back from the underworld, and each of the islands
Yeah.
Mhm.
parallels, right? It's like he has, you know, Calypso and Circe, right? As
Yeah.
parallel, right?
Mhm.
They have the Lotus Eaters and the Cattle of the Sun, right? A Temptation, right? You have,
Mhm.
each one is parallel to. You could look at them like a 2 act structure.
Yeah.
Shakespeare wrote in 5 acts, and again, people
Mhm.
try to make it 3 acts. But if Shakespeare wanted to write a 3 act play, he was perfectly capable, right? There's a reason why he wrote a 5 act play, right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
In
Yes.
Salaces's book, he was talking about a Japanese style that has 4 acts.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and it was a style like I've never read a book from that, tradition in that 4 act style. It's a traditional style that has it, in that
Mhm.
there's always other ways to do
Mhm.
things. And then not saying anything against the 3 act structure. And a
Right.
lot of my
Right.
stuff ends up being that anyway. But it's not, what I get upset about is when people say something is the only way to do things, the only way to
Absolutely.
write.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
it's not the only way to write. Like, for
Yeah.
every writer you can find, there's someone who did the exact opposite. And as long as you can find something to model yourself on of someone who was successful,
Yeah.
then, you know, you should be able to find a way that fits you.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, and it goes back to being as teachers that we are, not every student is going to be analytical. Not every student's going to be logical. Not every student's
Mhm.
going to be creative. Not every student is going to have that imagination. And that was one of the things that I was always running into when I was teaching writing, is that some would get so bogged down to they wanted that structure. They needed that
Sure.
structure because they couldn't access their own imagination, their own,
Yeah.
they couldn't do it on their own. That fantasy was just not their cup of tea.
Mhm.
So it's like anything else. It's good to have a toolbox full of everything that just like in the literary world. You know what an adverb is, you know what a conjunction is, you know what all these are. That doesn't mean you have to use every single one of them, but
All the
you have
time,
those
even. Yeah.
tools at your, disposal when they are required.
Yeah.
And one of the things metaphor that I would always use for with my kids about writing, I was like, think about putting a bicycle together. What are the main things you need for a bicycle? You need two wheels, somewhere to sit, and usually brakes and pedals. But you can put a whole bicycle together and leave out a few screws, but that doesn't mean the bicycle still won't run.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing with writing. And like you were saying, Ari, it's just 2 acts. What's wrong with 2 acts? What's wrong with 1 act?
Yeah.
There's so many
Plenty
one
of
act
great
plays,
1 act plays. Yeah. Yeah.
monologues,
Oh,
those
yeah.
types of things. They fit with who the writer is and who the story that needs to be told. That's the whole
Yes.
point of it, whether it's in poetry, whether it's in short story and play. Eugene O'Neill is one of my favorite playwrights ever. Long Day's Journey into Night is like phenomenal. To me, he's the like the 1900s version of Poe in certain one, because he writes about his own kind of life lessons and
Mhm.
everything. And we've all been told when we're, learning how to write and growing up, write what you know. And
Yeah.
then once you get some experience, then, create some other things that you don't know.
Yeah.
Because eventually, like we know, some writers like Poe has written things that, oh wait, have come into existence, and we're going, is he still here? Do we miss him somewhere? What happened? Yeah, it's the
Oh.
time traveler Poe. He's coming back.
Oh, yes. Yes. Just throwing out Richard Parker, and we're gonna leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but
Oh,
it's good that you have those. So your kids, are they interested in this whole writing? Are they old enough to be?
My daughter, actually, that's funny. My daughter, who is 10, just
Mhm.
finished second in a major poetry contest here on Long Island.
Oh,
Wow.
It's
yay! That's
actually
awesome.
Raynell Hall. It's a historic site in Oyster Bay, which
Mhm.
is about, say, about 5 miles from here. Had a
Okay.
poetry contest because one of the people associated with, I don't know the entire batch, so one of the people associated it allegedly wrote the first Valentine poem. Way
Oh,
back. It's a
Okay.
colonial site, like the first
yeah.
Valentine
Okay.
poem, and they have a Valentine's themed contest for students. And my daughter
Okay.
Maggie, her teacher, um, actually just chose a couple of kids from the class, her and another girl, to enter this contest. And we got the news yesterday she won, so she's going to be reading it on Monday night at Rainbow Hall.
Yay!
And
Oh, that's so awesome.
she actually last year placed in Walt Whitman the Walt
Ooh.
Whitman House, which is a little further out on Long Island from
Mhm.
us, but they
Okay.
have a student poetry contest every year. And she wasn't one of the
Nice.
grand winners, but she was an honorable mention and got to go to the house for the ceremony and all of that as well.
That's
So
awesome.
she is into it. She is very creative. She is a writer. She is an artist. She's an amazing artist. She's really good with colors. And my son is also creative, but he wants to be a puppeteer.
Oh,
He's 6 years
cool.
old, and that's all he wants is a puppeteer. And the thing
Okay.
Wow.
he doesn't understand is he's like, "Oh, Maggie goes to art class. You know, find me a puppetry class." And I'm like,
Hmm.
This is a lot harder to
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
find a
Well,
puppet."
Jim Henson's not around anymore,
Yeah,
Sonny, to teach you. So,
well, I was going to tell you that down in Atlanta, Georgia, there's the Puppetry
puppetry
Museum,
museum. Yeah,
and my husband and I have been twice. It is amazing, and they do some summer camps. And so check that out. It's the Puppetry Museum in
puppetry
Atlanta,
museum. Yeah,
Georgia, and they are phenomenal. And they make their own puppets. They have a room of like one room is basically history of puppets, and going back, I can't remember how it's like. I think early AD, maybe even some BC, but from all over the world, and then also leading up, and then they've got another room that has all of Jim Henson's, like, or not all of them,
yeah,
but a large chunk of them.
bunch of them because some of them are up here in
Yeah.
New York in the Museum of the Moving Image,
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
by
But
Kaufman near where Sesame Street is filmed.
okay, yeah, and they've got Sesame Street, they've got the Muppets, they've got some Fraggle Rock, Dark Crystal. I'm
Mhm.
forgetting
Yeah,
something.
Labyrinth
Labyrinth.
probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it's fantastic. So
Yeah,
highly recommend.
we were looking into going there. We couldn't swing it during Christmas breaks. They could have seen the Rudolph puppets. I know they do
It
something with that,
it we did
but
go
Yep.
to it,
Yep.
and it is amazing. It
uh
was so
but
it
we do. I
was
mean, in New York there are things, but they're like standalone, it's like you find one workshop. Yeah, I could find puppet
okay.
shows for him to go to. I'm
Yeah.
on the Jim Henson Foundation,
Yeah.
That's
newsletter, and
cool.
they have family programs, but
Okay.
there's not like a dedicate like you know someone's an artist, visual artist, right? You can find an art class, like you find a
Yeah.
gymnastics class. I could get
Yeah.
him t-ball, right? There, the things that you can find. Puppetry is a lot harder,
I
you
can
know.
Yeah.
imagine. Well,
But
and
he's creative though. Yeah,
so and some I don't know if there's a teacher at his school that's interested in doing like a puppetry club. That might be a good
and
thing to
maybe
get
when he
him.
gets a little older, because he's only
Yeah.
6, so
Okay.
yeah,
He's still
that's
young enough
he's
to,
still young.
yeah.
Although
Yeah.
he is dark. Like if anyone's gonna go in the Gothic Poe direction, it's gonna be him. He's in
Okay.
like
Nothing wrong with that.
I am reading him Coraline chapter by chapter as
Ooh,
his bedtime story when it's my turn
nice.
to
Cool.
put him to sleep. And he's like,
Okay.
you know, he watched the Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio when it was on Netflix, and it was
Uh-huh.
like his favorite movie. I was like, I wouldn't let my 10-year-old, my daughter, she'd have
Yeah.
nightmares for weeks, but he loves that
He
stuff. So
Oh, that's cool.
he got the darkness, he got you know,
And I can
uh,
just see him creating a skit using the count from Sesame
yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
One, because even though the count's not that dark, but still, it is a
Oh
vampire. It
no,
is,
they used to have way
yeah.
more vampire. There was one
Oh,
where
yeah.
he comes
Oh, yeah.
down and he's looking at you're a horrible mirror, no reflection on
Yes.
you, of course.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
like little allusions, like they don't do that as much anymore with him, but
No,
Okay.
they
Okay.
don't. It's kind of
Yeah.
missed it. Yeah, every
Yeah.
time I think about puppetry, I automatically have to think about Sound of Music. You know, those sheep. I just can't.
Oh,
I mean, that was my first introduction to puppetry besides Sesame Street, you know, sound
We
mhm.
because
went
it was
down to
my
Pittsburgh and
grandmother's favorite movie, you know, when they're doing the little puppets and all that,
right.
you know, the true,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, puppets and stuff. So it was like that's just cool because I mean that takes skills.
Yes.
Yes, we
I
went
mean, it
down.
all
We saw
takes
the Mr.
skills.
Rogers puppets in Pittsburgh last summer.
Oh, fun.
So we're
That's
trying.
fun.
We're trying, but they are both creative. They both do have some of the creativity, and they both are writing stories in their way.
That is wonderful. That is so cool.
And
Well,
actually, with the increase of ventriloquism
yeah.
being in popular now between Jeff Dunham and a few others that have won it and other things, I think they're kind of bringing that puppetry back into it too, not just from the
Yeah.
Muppets and everything. So that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Um, well, I was gonna say, kind of coming back around to
Yeah.
Poe. So, how did you like get hooked on Poe? Was it when you were younger? And so, we'd love to hear about that.
I actually brought a prop. Um,
Yay!
so like everybody else, I read The Raven sometime in middle school because of
Yes,
course we did.
It's a
And
staple.
it
then
is.
once again, just like with the Tolkien, I ordered this book, uh,
Oh, cool.
Mask
Famous
of the Red.
Tales of Mystery and Horror by
Love it.
Edgar Allan Poe from the Scholastic Book Fair. You can see the $1.95
Yes.
paperback thing and figure out how old I am based on that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yep.
I still have this. And it's actually no poetry in this one. It's all short stories. It's
Okay.
actually an interesting collection of short stories because it's got some really famous ones, and then it's got like some of them that you would expect to be in there aren't in there. It's like one of those old
Okay.
watermill classics. Got no explanatory notes, nothing like that. Just a little thin, tiny little volume with
Hmm.
about,
Hmm.
and post short stories tend to be short anyway, like even for short stories.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and let's see here. Two, three, four. There's five. Telltale Heart, Mask of the Red Death, Oblong Box, Murder in the Rue Morgue, and The Purloined Letter. And then
Okay.
about the author. So it's like 100 pages. And this was my real introduction to
Okay.
Poe and to that world. And you know, I kind of always liked it. I kind of always had a darkness. I think I just wrote my last blog post on the difference between science fiction and fantasy and,
Oh,
that whole
nice.
meme and whatever. And part of my thing is that fantasy comes from the irrational. And I think that,
Yeah.
more from the subconscious, whereas science fiction is more an extension of the logical, rational,
Yeah.
taken to the extreme. The speculative element is logical. And I think like Gothic is often like talked about like even shelved as a subgenre of horror. But I think
Hmm.
Gothic is really for me a separate genre from horror. It's much closer to fantasy than it is to horror in a lot of ways. For me.
Hmm.
Um, and you know, it sort of fit into the other things that I was reading then.
Yeah.
And um, that was the short stories, and I was kind of, always picked up Poe things here and there. And then when I got really into the poetry, I was actually at one point like I would say the plurality of high school English teachers who I know got
Okay.
into the romantic poets pretty
Hmm.
heavily, like Coleridge and Byron and
Yeah.
Blake and all of that. And then, from there it kind of branched out back into Poe. And, there's a
Okay.
lot of similarities. I feel like Poe's often, talked about as an American romantic kind of in a way, and there are a lot
Absolutely.
of themes, there are a lot of similarities. And, we were talking about it a little bit on that when we were guessing the other thing. But if you read
Yeah.
like the Rime of the Ancient Mariners right before Poe by a little bit. And
Hmm.
if you read the the stanza that's the description of life and death, the woman life and death, the death and life and
Yeah.
death, right? And you could see how that would, if, and then, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner was my favorite poem for a long time. And then you could see how that would bring you into Poe and into
Yeah.
Poe's
Absolutely.
poetry. There's a lot of overlap there in terms of theme, in terms of style, in terms of literary technique,
Hmm.
those types of things, in terms of Doré woodcut editions
Yeah.
of their work, like that. There's a lot of, similar stuff going on there, and that kind of brought me back into Poe
Okay.
as when I was as an adult. And yeah, I really love his poetry. Um
Yeah.
and I like that poetry with the hint of I like that gothic, the gothic mood and tone. I like the
Hmm.
formal technique. I love the way he plays with meter. We'll
Yeah. Oh, I
talk
do
about
too.
that in a couple of weeks with the sleeper.
Yes.
But you know, um, and it's just, and it can be appreciated in so many different ways. Like if you want to just listen to the poem and get lost in the mood and the thing, right? It's. I mean, that's how people usually think of Poe. But if you want to go in and dissect it,
Yeah.
um, on a line by line basis, it's great for that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
then there's the whole, we have the Poe Cottage up here in the Bronx, up in the
Yes.
Bronx, and the house in Baltimore, and then there's this whole mystery surrounding Poe and you know, the whole thing. He's just, so I got back into the whole Poe world
Hmm.
like that. And then there was the do I have it here? No, I don't have it right there. The Love Letters to Poe anthology. I had
Yes.
written a Gothic poem, and I was looking for a place to publish it. And
Okay.
Sarah Crokel Smith's anthology, she picked up that first one, and then I bid in all three. The third
Yeah. And
one's
that's
still on there.
exciting
That's good.
too,
Yeah.
because that's going to be
Um,
coming out
and
soon.
then, through her, like I remember that book was nominated. That book won the Visitor Award, and then
Yes.
I had my own Gothic collection that was
Mhm.
nominated last year. So I went down to the Poe House, met all you guys, all the
Yes.
Poe people in person down there. Didn't win, but it was great to be nominated.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you know, hang out in the Poe Fest and all that. And it's like this whole thing. It fits. Like
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
he fits my you know my whole it's on brand, I would say.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and just the Poe culture, the
Yeah.
Poe people,
Yeah.
it's such a really neat group, and everyone's so nice and
Yeah.
welcoming and just
It's a
helpful,
it's a
and
great community. It really
yes,
is. It really is,
absolutely.
especially getting into it over the last couple of years, through the Love
Mhm.
Letters to Poe and then through that book, into that Darkness Peering. Obviously, the title is an allusion,
Yeah, yeah,
to the Raven. But yeah, and it's just such a it's one of my favorite literary communities that I'm a part of.
absolutely, absolutely. So, you have a book coming out very soon,
Yes,
so
yes, I do.
why don't you talk about that? Because 'Cause
Yes.
we're very
It,
excited about
it
this.
will be launched by the time this episode is live. I hope it
Okay.
is. I'm planning. Yeah. And so what I have is a picture book for adults called The Awful Alphabet. And the story
Mhm.
behind this book is that um, my daughter was in school since she was 9 months old when I was teaching, and my wife was working everything. But then by the time my son was born, we had gotten paternity leave here in New York. I took my
Mhm.
full 4 years, and then we had a pandemic, and then
Yeah.
long
Mhm.
story short, I never came back. And but I would so he was home, and he only had 1 year of preschool before he went to kindergarten because I
Okay.
was his preschool, and I would do these little construction paper projects with him, like A is
Yeah.
for apple, B is for, you know, B is for butterfly, whatever, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And and it was wonderful, best time. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but
Mhm.
everyone has a bad day, you know.
Yes.
And I remember I posted online something like the project. I'm like, I do these little construction paper things, and today I want to do E is for entropy. And, you know, like I'd be
Yeah,
like,
there you
no,
go.
E is for elephant, E is for elephant. It's like, no, I want to do E is for entropy, E is for existential crisis, E is a, and actually one of the people who's actually one of my daughter's teachers is also a book illustrator. She's like, oh, you need to do that book. It's like you
Yeah.
write the poem, you need to do that book. I was like, okay, I'll do the book, but you need to illustrate it. If
Yeah.
you agree to illustrate it, then I'll do the book. And that was
Yeah.
2 years ago, and we were working on it. So I wrote the whole poem. You know, this alphabet's awful, like life it's a miss. So contemplate A from above the abyss. You
Oh,
know,
that's
that type
great.
of thing. You know, that's the A page, and so it goes through like that. Um, I could show some pages if I'm able
Yeah.
to. Yeah. And we worked
Yeah.
and we did this whole book. And the thing that I really like about it is that, um, can you see
Okay.
that?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so there's the
Oh,
first alphabet's
wow.
awful, like life it's a miss. So contemplate A from above the abyss.
That's awesome.
Can you see that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, B is
Uh-huh.
just as bad. You'll be singing the blues, broken and battered, beat up and bruised. And it continues that way. I'll show you some pictures from later on in there.
Okay.
Here's the E page because it started it all.
There we
Yes,
So
are.
now.
yeah,
Yes.
so there you see E is for entropy. Things far apart as existential ennui envelops your heart. It's got cut off there, but I could show, so, and the thing is, it's all, I'll show you one of my favorite pages, and then
Okay.
that's going to be, I guess, we'll talk about it a little more. There's the O page. O
Okay.
looks, O looks like a zero, a hoop to jump through, a tool for oppressors to stay above you. Um, you know, and the thing is, with this book, it's all traditional. So Sarah McCall Efron, who's the illustrator, she
Uh-huh.
did a traditional watercolor and ink. It's not digitally drawn, it's traditionally drawn on paper and then scanned in.
Mhm.
I have a hand letterer, Mike Ponce, who's also doing the book layout, and he lettered it by hand. Like it's the old fashioned like on thing and
Wow.
clipping it on, and then obviously it has to be scanned back into the computer.
Right,
So
right.
because it's old, metered poetry, like it's kind of in a way reminiscent of like Dr. Seuss or Maurice Sendak or like,
Yeah.
that kind of vibe, but also it's got this dark kind of,
Yes.
um, it's all the negative stuff that goes on, and that's kind of, I think, my artist described it as therapy and an exorcism in the
Yes.
thing,
That's
in the thing.
great.
So, you know, it's like, you have all these picture books for adults now. You got like, Go the F to Sleep, or
Yeah.
all my friends are dead, if you've seen that one,
I've
or
heard of
Hmm.
that one. I've
you
heard of
go,
that
that
one.
one's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So it's in that vein. It's going to be a big book. It's going to be um 11, 11 by 8.5. So it's going to be, if
Oh,
you want a
wow.
horizontal
Okay.
Cool.
aspect book, so you can see all the big, really give the illustration their
Hmm.
due. Mike did a great job with the lettering, weaving it in so that the meter still carries, because I wrote it in stanzas, but that it also fits in with the art, that kind of
Yeah.
psychedelic art that Sarah has. It's really you know, we really think it's great. We hope other people like it
Yeah.
too.
It look just what you just showed
Yeah,
us looks beautiful. I mean, it
thank you.
just looks absolutely awesome.
And it's
I can't
going to
wait to
be
see it.
on, yeah, it's going to be on Backerkit. A
Yes.
lot of people know Backerkit as a fulfillment
Hmm.
Hmm.
service for Kickstarter. Like if you've been on Kickstarter, things have been fulfilled through Backerkit. Backerkit came up with its own crowdfunding platform. Um,
Okay.
so it's
Okay.
going to be on the Backerkit crowdfunding platform. Um, it is on, I should say, because we're doing this interview before it comes out, but
Right.
it'll be out. It is out at the time you are watching this.
Yes.
Exactly.
So go to Backerkit
Future.
and go to Backerkit, um, get it. We have a lot of nice, lot of fun tier levels,
Okay.
um, a lot of fun rewards. One of the upper rewards, I'm offering a custom sonnet for one of them,
Oh,
like that I will
wow.
write a sonnet for you about almost any subject. Uh, you know, you always have to throw that in there.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
But
it sounds like school with,
yeah, yeah.
it's gotta be school appropriate.
Okay. Well, maybe not school appropriate,
You
but
know what
it's
I
there
mean,
are
though.
yeah, but there are certain subjects that we
Yeah,
but almost anything you want. They have that. There's a bunch of prints from various artists that you could
okay.
attach onto the book. Sarah's offering some original art on the higher end. We got some stickers. We got the other book. You can get the Into That Darkness Peering along
Okay.
with it. Writing consultations with various editors and different genres and
Nice.
things like that. So
Okay.
you know, um, we hope people will join us and will support it, and we'd be very
Yeah.
thankful if you would. Um, we think it's a fun book. People seem to react positively to the idea,
Mhm.
and um, the way it's all coming together with the with the art and with the lettering and the way it presents the poem. Um, we're really proud of it, and we hope people
Yeah,
will like it.
you should be. It looks like it's gonna be so fun. It's so fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
especially for an
absolutely.
adult,
Yeah,
because I can
Yes.
already
and
hear
certain
F in my
kids,
head.
and
So
certain
yeah,
kids.
you got the E and the entropy, and then it
Yeah.
automatically went on to the F and
You went
filled
on
in
to
my own.
you
So it's
filled
like,
in your
oh,
own F.
yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
Well, there is no profanity in the book.
See, there you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
It's not that kind of book, but it's still dark.
Yes.
Yeah,
Certain
but the adult in my
Yes,
head,
yes, yes. You can make your own
because
awful
you know
alphabet.
that
Yeah,
as teachers we don't cuss in
Oh,
the classroom, but it's
right.
in our head, and we're going, oh,
Yeah.
don't come out of my mouth, don't come out of my mouth. Okay.
I know one of my former colleagues, one of my best friends in teaching, she used to use the letter F to teach parts of speech, just the letter
Mm-hmm.
F, and move the letter F around the sentence when she's
okay.
teaching grammar to high school students,
Oh, I
and they
bet they
loved it.
love that.
Yeah, they love it. It's
I'll
like,
do it.
what? I don't know what it stands for. Just we'll use the F, and now
Yes.
it's an adverb, and now it's a noun, and now it's now it's a verb, and
Oh,
Now you're paying attention to me and
yeah,
listening, so there we
exactly.
go.
Yeah,
so you know there's ways. There's ways to do
absolutely.
it. I used to teach seniors, so a lot of the some of the books had
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm,
rather strong language in them,
absolutely.
and
Yes.
I've
Yeah.
taught a Clockwork Orange, um,
Yeah.
Yep.
which
Oh,
is
yeah.
so you know
I'll do it.
so there are things, but this particular book, not that I'm against anyone doing it.
Abs
Everybody should write how they want and whatever fits the
Yeah.
project, but this particular book does not have any profanity in it.
okay. All
And
right.
that would be just fine because
Yeah.
just like with Poe's stories, he gives you enough information
Yes.
that where your own imagination can
Yep.
fill in
Yes.
what you want.
Yes.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
that's just perfect.
Yeah.
It's the way it's supposed to be.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Well, Ari, do you have any events coming up where you're going to be at where people can, see you and like listen to your poetry or anything like that?
Um, I have a number of other podcast appearances
Okay,
coming up
great.
with online events mostly
Okay.
the next couple of months.
Okay.
They're like an online book tour type of thing.
Oh,
Where
great. Okay.
I
And
will
so you're
be
on most social
yes.
media, right?
Yes, I am on most social media as well. I mean, I'm gonna be back with you guys on the 27th.
Yep.
Yes, for Poe Unplugged.
Unplugged. We'll talk about the sleeper, right?
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
as you
Right.
said, we maybe be doing some giveaways and things like
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
that as well for the
Yes.
campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know when it's coming out, but I recorded an interview for a writing podcast last
Okay.
week that they said they were gonna, I think Monday or Tuesday, it's gonna be coming out on the Get Your Meds with George Medina, where he interviews
Okay.
different writers. I'm gonna be on Indie Comics Relay on March 5th,
Okay.
and Get in Tune with Michael Grassi on the 27th, Comic Book
Okay.
School on the 12th. So I have a number of these online things. In
Mm-hmm.
terms of physical appearances, probably not until the summer.
Okay.
Um, just the way it's working out now. I mean, I'll be around. If anything comes up, I will be
Yes.
at them. I just did one, like I said, on the 29th. I had a reading at a local library. Wasn't so low,
Okay.
about an hour away from me, but so I do those various poetry anthologies that are coming out that will have launch events and things that I'll be reading at, and I'll have an open mic afterwards and that type of thing. But
Okay.
in terms of solid dates that I know, um, it's going to be mostly online things
Okay. Okay.
for the foreseeable future. Yeah,
Okay. Well, that sounds great. That's exciting. And I know you have some poems that you would
I
like to
do.
share. And I
I
know
have
our
something.
listeners
Yes.
and watchers our viewers, I should say, will love to hear them.
All right. I brought three because I didn't
Yeah,
know
that's
how long.
fine.
The first one I brought was Night Walkers, which is the one that won first place in the
Yes.
Poet Like
Mhm.
Poe competition.
Hmm.
Figure if people are interested, if they want to see what I what won last year, and
Yes.
since I'll be a judge, then maybe that would be a good one to
Cool.
read.
Oh, it's perfect.
So
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
going to be reading it, obviously Gothic and
Mhm.
inspired by Poe.
Yes.
So this was called Night Walkers. Whistling
Cool.
through the graveyard, I came upon a man, a ghost of one killed long ago, buried in that strand. No, I am not dangerous, he whispered soft to me. I just saw you walking here and sought some company, for I walk between these stones, alone, eternally. And so I walked there by his side, below the pale moon, whose light framed us beneath the clouds of night's dark inky gloom. All through the night we wandered, in perfect harmony, as softly in my ear he spoke, recounting memories, a secret shared betwixt these stones, between my friend and me. He spoke to me throughout the night until the break of day, for with the coming of the light, all ghosts must go away. Returned he unto his grave, to rest now peacefully, as I was left to ponder what he had said to me, whispered lightly in my ear, meant only just for me. And since that night I wandered, and oft when I'm alone, I think upon that night I walked between those sacred stones. I hope that when I'm dead and gone, if restless shall I be, some kind soul will stop a while and do the same for me, walk with me and talk a while, and my companion be.
Love
That
There
was
you
it.
go.
Nightwalkers.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
Do the
You
little
could read it
snaps.
on the 6 degrees of Edgar
Yeah.
Allan Poe website on the
Yep.
Poet
Yes.
Like
Yes.
Poe
Yes.
page.
Yes.
It
Yes.
is up
You
there.
you poed it like Poe.
I wrote it like Poe. I try to, there were a number of techniques that I tried to get in there. I mean, beyond the Gothic theme in terms of the
Yes.
meter, the way
Mhm.
it changes, things like that in that poem.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
The
It's,
imagery was awesome.
thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I tried, the repetition is a big element in Poe, and a lot of the poems that I got that repeated the
Hmm.
uneven rhyme schemes that indicate my madness, switching
Mhm.
between iambic and trochaic meter. These were some of the things that
Yeah.
I had in mind while I was writing it for a
Mhm.
Poe themed.
Yeah.
Uh,
Absolutely.
the next one that I got, and this is one I don't often read, but I figured there would be a good one to read here. This
Yeah.
is my poem, When the House of Usher Falls. And
Oh, nice.
Yes.
this is
Yes.
from the second Love Letters to Poe anthology,
Yes.
which was
Yes.
themed on the fall of the House of Usher.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
the fall of the House of Usher is obviously very prominent in the Poe world these days because
Yes.
everybody
Netflix.
loves the
Yeah.
Netflix, the Netflix thing. And, um, this is kind of, if you remember in the fall of the House of Usher, there's that little poem in the middle about, he takes out
Mhm.
his guitar and he starts singing this song. It's kind of smack in the middle of the story. And it's
Yeah.
kind of this thing, and it's the story of the fall of the House of Usher retold from the perspective of the creatures in that song.
Hmm.
Is sort of the idea that I had behind
Is this the one, the
Okay.
Haunted
Okay.
Palace? That's the
the
one that's in the House of Usher.
House of Usher,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah, I think the
the
Haunted
yellow
Palace.
pinion,
Yeah.
yeah, and all that stuff, right? So these
Okay.
creatures were, are
Mhm.
still there, and they're influencing things, and you'll
Yes.
hear them. Okay. So
Cool.
this is When the House of Usher Falls from
Okay.
Love Letters to Poe, Volume 2,
Okay.
Houses of Usher. When the winds of winter whisper their ghostly, ghastly howl, when the storm clouds all a twitter, presently we prowl. When the masonry doth shiver, when the dead do walk the halls, in the moonless night at midnight, when the house of Usher falls. When the cerements do blister in discordant melody, wakened is his sister, risen shall she be. When she takes those fateful footsteps and walks those ancient halls, when the doors for her we open, into his arms she falls. When long ago a valley, ruled over by a king, before whom saintly seraphs his echoed wisdom sang, when draped now in sorrow those yellow pinioned halls presage some distant morrow, when the house of Usher falls. When morning is forgotten, when many years have gone, when your heart's no longer rotten, when you think that you've moved on, when on some night it's storming, and rain and wind withal, the nightmare till the morning, into his arms she falls. When some day hence you'll wander through the country all alone, presently you'll ponder some ancient ruined stones. With insufferable gloominess, perhaps you will recall that melancholy madness when the house of Usher falls.
Very nice. I love it. I
Um,
remember reading that when I read, like, the whole volume, and
yeah,
when I read both volumes, and I try not to just read through too much at one time to
right.
soak it all in, and I remember going back and rereading your poem because I love the way you started it, and it was just like, "I love this. This is beautiful."
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and like I was saying, like, that first When the Winds of Winter Whisper, there goes, like, I had that scribbled down in my notebook that I carry, and I had
Yeah,
those lines, and that was the beginning of it, and sort of
yeah,
go through, and then, you go back through after, because it's for a Houses of Usher anthology, and try to pick out certain phrases that fit
mhm.
metrically, and, you know, get them in so that you echo the original story as
Absolutely, and I
closely
and
as
I think and
possible.
the mood and the tone in that poem totally fits with The Fall of the House of Usher. Absolutely.
So thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Um, so um, the last one is a poem that I wrote that won the Blue Ribbon in the Long Island Fair last summer.
Okay.
Um, and they have a rhyming and a non-rhyming poetry category, and I won, of
Mhm.
course, the rhyming poetry category. And
Mhm.
I am sure that I will never do as well again because the theme of the content, they give you the same. So the way it works for the artistic exhibits is they give
Mhm.
you a theme for the county fair, and you
Okay.
have to write something to that theme or paint
Okay.
something to that theme, so that I guess they have a basis of judging everyone on the same, like they're getting similar ideas, for it. So
Okay.
the theme this year was Long Island haunts, which, of
Okay.
Nice.
course, it like
Okay.
lends itself to my gothic,
Yes.
kind of historical thing. And this one is actually the second poem that I wrote, called The Widow's Walk. The first one was in Love Letters to Poe, Volume 1.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I called this one The Widow's Walk 1849. And for people who
Okay.
don't know, um, there are a lot of Gothic houses, Gothic architecture houses like that, and not
Mhm.
necessarily haunted, but up in on the North Shore of Long Island. And
Okay.
when we first moved here from the city, because we could afford to have one kid in New York and not two, we moved out to Long Island when the second one was born. Um, I noticed, like, not my house was built around 1930,
Okay.
1930 something, I think 34, I think. My wife would know. But um, there are houses, though, in the older houses, the bigger older houses that we can't afford. A lot of them were built in the 1870s, and they're
Oh,
these
wow.
great old Gothic houses. There's a
Mhm.
particular style of architecture that's typical of Gothic houses in the Northeast on Long Island and throughout New England.
Okay.
I'm sure you've seen them with the wood shingles and the big porches with the columns, and
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a number of different substyles and a lot of them have very ornate filigree type things on the roof, and they, you know,
Okay.
um, but one of the things that the houses in particular on Long Island have, and I think they also have them in Connecticut and from any of the whaling in Massachusetts, and then but for any of the whaling ports, because whaling
Mm-hmm.
was the big industry out here in
Mm-hmm.
the 19th century. It was one of the major industries in the country in the 1970 in the sorry 18 in the 1800s, and you know there was this feature where they have a fence around the roof. It's like a porch, but it's on your roof.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the I was like, this is interesting. I hadn't seen that before we moved out here. Really, I hadn't really noticed it before. And it's called the Widow's Walk. And the
Okay.
idea
Mm-hmm.
is that, um, whaling being a dangerous profession, it's 19th century. The sailors are, they're all men going out to sea, and the women would stand on top of the houses on this widow walk and look for the sails as they were
Mm-hmm.
coming in, looking for
Mm-hmm.
their husbands or their sons or whoever to return.
Yeah.
And it's called the widow's walk because often they didn't, and often they wouldn't know because, when you're out at sea, the ship might come back before the mail does, right? Depending on what
That's
part of the
true.
world
Yeah.
your whaling ships are going. I mean, think about, Moby Dick is the most where most people know this from, but all the different, like you're out in some place in the southern hemisphere, halfway around the world, you're not going to get a letter back necessarily before the
Yeah.
ship
Oh, that's
comes. So,
true.
Mm-hmm.
you know, you don't know when that ship comes back. So they call
Mm-hmm.
it the widow walk, and there's a bunch of superstitions associated with it that probably aren't true.
Oh,
So
neat. Yeah,
that's
but
the
still neat.
background. Yeah, that's the background that you would need to understand. Actually, both of the poems about the widow's walk, but
Okay.
particularly this one.
Okay.
So
All right.
this is called the Widow's Walk, 1849.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Cold Spring Harbor, 1849. I walk around the roof at night, up above my home, waiting for his ship to sight, my husband to return. The townsfolk, they all think I'm mad. His ship's gone down, they say. Sunk she was, all lives were lost, buried neath the waves. But still I wend my way around the walk above my home, between the ocean and the moon, a widow now, alone. For though I know his ship's been lost, sunk beneath the sea, on certain nights his ghost returns and keeps me company. We sit and talk throughout the night until the break of day, when waves are crowned with dawn's first light and ghosts must fade away.
Oh, that is awesome. Oh, I love that.
So that was it.
Yes.
That's from the Blue Ribbon from the Long Island Fair last summer.
Okay.
So
That
Very cool.
reminds me of a movie called The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. I don't know if you've ever,
I've not
it's Rex Harrison and oh, is it Gene Tierney? I think Jeannie, does that sound
I
right?
think so. Yeah, I think
Black
that's
and
right.
white, and she has this house, and he was an old sea captain, or not really old, but a sea captain, just very what you think of as a sea
yeah,
captain. He would come in
Mhm.
and haunt, and then they kind of fell in love. I'm not going to tell the whole
right.
thing, but it's a great love story, and just that
Mhm.
kind of reminds me. It has remnants of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
very cool.
I'll check it out. Yeah, so that one's probably less inspired. It's still gothic,
Oh
but it's less
yes,
but it's
yeah,
less Poe-like than I would say the other two. If you were saying
yes,
like
yeah.
in terms of like, you know, obviously the entire genre is Poe
Hmm.
inspired,
Mhm.
but in terms of the style of the poetry, that one's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just
Nothing
wonderful.
wrong with different.
Yeah.
Nope, not at all.
Still very nice.
Well, Jeannie, do you have any other questions for Ari? We've
Nope,
covered a
I think
lot.
he covered enough, and especially about his upcoming, I know he's going to be
Oh,
with us, but
Yeah,
wanting to
with
make sure that
Backerkit
everyone
and
knows
Backerkit.
how
It's
to
on
find him
Backerkit now. Yeah.
on
Yes.
his
yes.
social
My
media
social
so they can
media
find
at
you.
the
Yeah.
yes, at the Surreal Ari.
Hmm.
I may not be on every platform you're on, but if I am
Okay.
on a platform, it will be at
Yeah.
the Surreal Ari. So
Okay. All right.
Twitter,
Perfect.
Instagram, Facebook, Threads, Blue Sky, TikTok. I
Okay.
don't know what else is gonna come up, but if I'm on something, it will be that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Used to be
Just do
3,
it.
now it's 8. Just find that handle and you will find me.
Okay. Perfect.
Google
Perfect.
search it or Bing it. There we go.
Yeah, there you go. Well, Ari, do you have anything else you want to leave us with, the viewers and listeners?
Um, well, just thank you for having me, and
Absolutely.
thank you
Yeah.
for as I said, thank you for welcoming me into the Poe community. Thank you
Yes,
like that,
absolutely.
and yeah, please do check out the Backer Kit.
Hmm.
Please do check out the new book, The Awful Alphabet, and
Yes.
that is the next thing you know out now
Definitely
on
look forward
Backerkit.
to it.
Yep. Cool.
Yes. Well, all
Yep.
right. So go check out the Surreal Ari Backer Kit, find the awful alphabet, and buy it. It's going to be beautiful and wonderful. You've seen a
Yeah.
little bit of a hint there. Well, on that note, Jeannie, I guess we are
We are Poe
out.
out.